Hello, today we're going to attempt to bring in a new idea, but you're going to see it's a really beautiful way of connecting everything we've spoken together. The first three Keystone lectures were giving a sort of a comprehensive look at the overall ideas which God and God Himself put into the creation, to do with the purpose of the world, and what's the meaning of good and evil, what we're meant to do here, what our job is, the nature of God Himself. So now we're going to bring in a really nice idea which is going to tie basically everything we've said together in one concept. And the truth is, many of the other lectures which we tend to do, almost all of them are going to be touching on this idea we're going to speak about now. Maybe this should have been one of the Keystone lectures itself, but really this, you could probably understand this idea from what we've spoken about so far. So let's get straight into it. So there's a certain blueprint, a certain repeating pattern which God uses to create the world and to create everything, whether it's physical things, spiritual things, or concepts, abstract things or tangible things. The idea is that God creates everything as a reflection of Himself. And we might explain at the end why it's like that, one possible reason. So that there is the idea of the holographic effect. That's there's the idea that in a hologram, apparently, that's how it was explained to me. I haven't gone into it too much. A hologram, a real hologram, basically is a two-dimensional canvas, whatever the material is, and on it you've got what seems to be a three-dimensional picture. It's because the using lasers, they take pictures of the object from different angles, and somehow that's all blended together on the background or the screen. An incredible property of this these holograms is apparently a real hologram. Again, I can't testify to the scientific aspect of it, but this is the concept anyway, so we'll use it out of convenience. If you break part of the hologram away and you look at that little piece, you've actually got the whole hologram there. You don't just have, like, let's say, got a horse on the hologram. You break off like the corner, you don't just get the hoof of the horse, you'll actually have the whole horse there in the picture, right? So this is this idea of the parts containing the whole, and the whole, obviously the whole structure of something obviously contains all its parts, but each part contains within it an aspect of the whole itself. You see this idea in DNA. The DNA is it's a long molecule with lots of information in it. So you would have thought that, when the embryo is getting formed, the DNA says, okay, this bit goes to the nose. Okay, that's information for the nose, that goes there. That's for the eyes, that's for the ears, that's for the hands. The different pieces of information disperse everywhere and go to their relevant places. That's not actually what happens. It's quite incredible how it works. Is the DNA for the nose is the DNA for the whole body. The whole body goes, the DNA keeps, the cells keep splitting, and each cell's got the DNA of that human being which is being formed. It splits and it splits and it splits, and somehow the DNA here knows, okay, so I've got to take the nose part of the DNA to produce a nose, and this bit takes the foot part of the DNA. But really, every single part of your body, the DNA is the DNA for your whole body. Yes, that's how you can identify people by DNA. So it's incredible. So if you take the DNA from any part of the body, you've got the DNA over here in my nose for my whole body. So you can recreate my whole body just by taking a bit of DNA from my nose. I'm not sure exactly the technical. I'm not a genetic engineer or whatever it's called. Yeah, we take a hair, take any part of the body will contain that unique DNA to the person, and through that you can recreate the whole body, theoretically. Right? So this is the idea that in creation, everything God makes has this DNA of the whole of creation in it. So if you think about it, that would be another way, a poetic way of saying it, like the rabbis call a man is an olam cotton, he's a small universe, right? So if you look at how a man looks, yeah, you can find a parallel in the whole universe to every aspect of a man. In fact, I think there's even a medrash which speaks about it. It speaks about just like you've got, I think it speaks about like the hairs. Maybe the hairs are like the forests. You find a hair in humans, you find a hair in the world. You've got forests, just like you've got maybe the animals in the forest as well. Maybe like bacteria or things like that, because we know we've got living things inside of us as well. Who knows, right? And just like inside a man, you've got a soul. Yeah, inside of everything, you've got God giving everything life force. And I think it's a very interesting. I haven't found it inside this this midrash, this rabbinic source, but apparently it goes through like the whole body and shows how you find parallels between the man and the world. So you see, that's just one example of seeing how you see the reflection of big God pattern which God makes for the world, and that's reflected in everything in the creation. So we're going to focus on this idea today. Just before we actually get into the details, we'll give one other example to make this understandable, a bit more nuanced now. The idea of fractals. Fractals are basically patterns which repeat themselves on the branches of the pattern contain the pattern of the whole. So let's say you've got like what are they called, icicles? No, not icicles. Snowflakes. Okay, snowflakes have got unique patterns. If you look at the way snowflakes are under a magnifying glass, you see they've got a certain pattern which starts off. One might be sort of going in 6 directions, just a straight line. So what you see is that from there you get one of the branches you take, it will also branch into 6 parts or something like that. And then each one of those parts will branch into 6 little strands. On a smaller level, you might have something like a branch with 3, and then the 3 splits into 3, and each one of those 3 splits into 3, and just keeps repeating, making a very elaborate pattern, very sort of symmetrical, sort of kaleidoscope type pattern. That's the idea we're going to speak about today, is that God creates everything, the immense complexity of the universe. We're talking about every single aspect of it, physical, conceptual, everything, using a very, very simple, straightforward pattern. It's mind-boggling. But and we're going to try demonstrating that so you can sort of like maybe get to feel it a bit. Yeah. So let's look at the root, the source of where does this pattern come from. It comes from God himself. Now, as we know, there's nothing to speak about when talking about God himself, right? But remember in the second Keystone lecture, we spoke about God having 2 dimensions where we can refer to God, right? To give us a framing of what God is. The first one is God himself, which we explained is above concepts, is so totally transcendent. There's no concepts, no time, no space, nothing which our minds, which use concepts to understand things, to hook onto, because there aren't any concepts there, because it's before concepts were created. Then we have the second aspect of God, which is From our point of view, it's God's revealed to us that he wants a relationship with us. He wants to do good to us. So if you have a look at those two elements by themselves, this is the deep part of the lecture today. The rest is just going to be applications. And obviously, very beautiful, the broad, amazing spectrum of different things. As I said, it really literally contains everything in creation without exception. Everything falls into this pattern, no exception at all. Right? I can say that only because I understand the concept. I can't tell you on every single thing exactly how it reflects the pattern, but we're going to show many, many examples hopefully today, please God. So look at this, what's going on here. So you've got something which is the source, and then you've got the expression. Or you could say, I don't want to use the word physical, because remember, God revealing himself to the world is not a physical thing, but compared to God himself, you can call it physical. You can call it something which is sort of more on the receiving end of things, right? So you've got God, the source of everything. So by definition, that's not a taker. But then you've got the idea of God revealing himself as a giver. But that revelation as a giver, where does that come from? It's very hard to speak about this as well, because on one level, it is at one with God. There's no two gods, right? There's two aspects of God, paradoxically, where we've got to work with either one or the other. But the idea is, if you look at these two things as the blueprint, our perception of the source of everything is one being which is transcendent, and then you've got a revelation of that which is relevant to our world. You've got the idea of a binary, you've got a duality, right? So this is not to be confused with the duality of certain religions like Zoroastrian, where they believe in a force of good and evil. As we say, this is all very, very one God only, no other powers besides that God, that being. However, God's created a system where there seems to be some sort of fracture from our point of view, because if there wasn't a fracture, we wouldn't be able to exist, because without that fracture, it would just be God and nothing else can exist. So in order for us to exist, God had to, so to speak, create another concept. Well, to create concepts itself. It's very hard to put this in words, because we're talking about very, very abstract ideas here. Maybe I just have to be clumsy in my words, and hopefully everyone will understand what I mean. There was another aspect of God which is revealed now. Remember, revelation is not the thing itself, but from our point of view, that gives us connection with the thing which is doing the revealing. The light waves which connect us with the source of the light, which is God himself, behind the curtain, so to speak. So these two aspects of God set up a type of binary interaction where you've got a source and you've got something which comes out from the source. Okay? Now, we explained that that's what the interaction between the soul and the body is in our very first lecture. The soul is a spiritual source of life of the body. Without the soul, the body wouldn't exist. It definitely wouldn't be living. On one level, it doesn't even exist. Really, the body is like a coating or a physical manifestation of the soul, in a way. So we see this idea of source and revelation in human beings. That's the idea in Genesis, in Bereshit. We're created in the image of God. Right? We're created in this structure which God creates to reveal himself to the world. We also reflect that structure. I think we might have spoken about it once already. Right. Okay. So we've got this idea of the source and the expression, you're going to see it's repeated in everything. Now, we can adjust the definition of that just to make it easier for us to understand. We've got the idea of a giver and a taker, right? So even though we can't really say from our point of view that the revelation of God to us is a taker compared to the ultimate being itself, but in a way, the revelation of God to us wouldn't need God himself to exist, right? So in a way, you have got this interaction of giver and a taker on a very, very high abstract level. The purpose is for those two elements to come and close the gap and become one. That's the idea of the unity of the two opposites. You've got the idea of, I guess you could use the idea of Aryeh Kaplan, who calls it thesis, antithesis, right? So you've got thesis is the positive concept, antithesis is the negative one, and then you've got the harmony, which is the synthesis between the two. Now, when we say the negative one, it doesn't mean it's evil in the traditional colloquial way of understanding what the word evil means. It means it's something in contrast to the other. It's the lower form, or it's the form which is going to be receiving, which is going to be elevated to become at one with the source. Okay, well, very abstract. Let's give some examples now. Okay, so just like God and his revelation have some sort of binary aspect to them, so too you've got the soul and the body. The idea of the soul and the body is that the soul's meant to be giving to the body, but as we explained, the Jewish, I think it's absolutely unique, this idea. I think it's unique, this idea. The Jewish idea of the world to come is the idea of the soul and the body both going to the world to come together, and the body becoming unified with the soul permanently. This is the resurrection of the dead. That's the idea of the soul and the body reuniting. Yeah. Okay, so also we spoke about one of the lectures about the idea of the language of the Torah, the Hebrew language, Lashon HaKodesh, being the source of you've got the spiritual being the source of the physical. Yeah, so we see that you've got the idea of spirit, you've got the spiritual realm and you've got the physical realm. It's another binary interaction, and as we say, the spiritual and the physical are eventually meant to come together. But part of that is the spiritual language. Of course, on one level, you've got the spiritual language and the physical languages. So already you've got sort of an interaction there between the spiritual and a physical manifestation of the same concept. But then you've got the spiritual language of creation itself. You've got the Hebrew words which God uses to create the physical objects. So you see this idea is repeating. This idea of the fractal, it's branching out. You've got on one hand, you've got the binary connection, the binary duality between spiritual and physical now. But now we're seeing, in terms of languages, they've got spiritual language. Remember, language is a spiritual thing, but in language itself, you've got a spiritual and physical. So you've got the two branches. They say this is spiritual, that's physical, right? So spiritual language is, as we explained, Hebrew language is a spiritual entity, spiritual concept. Branching off that, you have two aspects of language. You've got a more spiritual language, which is the Hebrew, and you've got the physical language, which is the 70 other languages, based languages. Okay? So that's the idea. You're going to see this extrapolation and branching off of concepts, hopefully quite a lot. Then you get a picture of how beautiful the whole thing is. Okay. So these are the very abstract ideas. We're going to hopefully get on to some more down-to-earth ones soon, so I can go a bit faster through them. So again, you've got God, two aspects of God. that creates a sort of not dichotomy, duality of spiritual and physical, giver and taker. We have that expressed on the human level by the soul and the body. Right? We're going to speak about the idea of Jews and non-Jews as well. The Jews being a light to the nation, to the nations. Yes, so even on the human level, where you've got soul and body, spiritual and physical, that itself has its own branch between spiritual and physical. The job of the Jews is to bring spiritual reality into the world. The job of the non-Jew is the idea of giving a place for spirituality to rest and to be a manifestation of the spirituality which the Jewish people are meant to give in, which parallels the languages. You've got the spiritual language is meant to be manifest in the physical languages somehow. And we know that's exactly what happened at the Tower of Babel. Like we explained, the 70 nations are actually physical branches from that spiritual language. In a way, I suppose you could say the 70 nations are a branch from the Jewish nation, because the idea of the Jewish nation is before the sin of Adam, all of mankind was meant to be spiritual, right? And because of the Adam sin, there was a fracture in reality, and you have two different sets of nations where the Jewish people are trying to continue the job of Adam, whereas the nations are more compared to the clothes of Adam is spoken about, very special clothes. Might speak about that one time. Yeah. The idea of two types of light. In Hebrew, the word light is oir, aleph, vav, and resh. But there's another way of. It said in the Torah, it says that God made for Adam after the sin. He made kosnos oir. Oir is with an ayin. Ayin, vav, resh. Oir means skin. He made clothes made of skin. That means like furs from rabbit's fur, right? But in Rabbi Meir says that Rabbi Meir's Sefer Torah, it doesn't mean this literally. It means whatever it means. It might be different meanings what it means. But in his Sefer Torah, he was a scribe. This is how the story goes. It was written Kosnos Oyer with an aleph. Right, the difference between an aleph and an ayin, you can hear the way I'm pronouncing it, pronouncing these two letters. Aleph is much more pure. It's the first letter of the aleph base. Aleph is the first letter. Aleph is it's more of a pure, abstract sound. It doesn't really have its own sound. It's just sound itself. Whereas oyer is also comes from the throat, but it's sort of like a more of an earthy and right? So it's sort of like an earthier sound. So oyer means light. Oyer with an ayin means skin. So the idea is that Adam, on one hand, his clothes were light. If you look at Adam in his perfected state, you just see light. That will be his physical covering. But because of the sin, we've got skin now. Physical skin, which allows you to come in contact with the person you're communicating with, but it creates a barrier. When you're looking at me, you're not seeing my soul, you're only seeing my physical. Well, Adam, before the sin, before eating from the tree, you'd look at him and the body was so one with the soul, the body itself would radiate and illuminate the light of the soul. It would be glowing. It's interesting, that's why the word oyer, which means skin, in Hebrew, if you vowel it differently, instead of oyer, it can be iver. Iver means blind or to hide. Blind person, everything's hidden from him. So skin, oyer, is like a hide, because it hides the light. Nice idea I heard from Rabbi Tatz, I believe. And how did that happen? How did this fracture happen in the universe? Is because Adam ate from the tree of knowledge. Again, now you've got another duality. We know that there were two trees in the Garden of Eden, Gan Eden, right? Besides all the other trees, but there were two central trees. One was called Eitz HaChayim, B'soich HaGon. In the middle of the garden was the tree of life, Chayim, and the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Now, actually, what it was, according to our commentaries, is that the tree actually had one root, but as it came to the surface, you have the tree of life in the middle, and around it grew some sort of like a bush or whatever, another tree called the tree of knowledge of good and evil. They represent these two ideas of connecting with God. You can either attach yourself to life, which is God. God is the source of life. So Adam's job was actually to eat from the tree of life. We all know he wasn't meant to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, but he was meant to eat. People don't realize he was meant to eat from the tree of life. The idea of eating, we've still got to speak about that. But the idea of eating is he's connecting to that reality of life through eating the tree of life. Through eating the tree of knowledge of good and evil, that means there's a me. There is someone separate from God. Because knowledge means I know. Who's doing the knowing? It's me. I know there's good and evil now. I can be a chooser. I can have bechira, free will. Whereas if you were to eat him from the tree of life instead, he would just say, I'm nothing. I realize God is everything. So there's eat from the tree of life, attach yourself to God permanently, and yeah, that would have been everything. He chose the other path, the path of difficulty, of suffering, hardship, which we're fixing for the last few thousand years. That is the idea of the two trees there, right? Again, you've got this duality. Are we going to go to the source, or are we going to be distracted by something which makes us feel more comfortable? Okay, right, and there you've got the, as we said, that we've got from this, you've got the spiritual, the physical. You've got the soul and the body. Within the soul and the body, you've got this duality as well of the 70, the Lashon HaKodesh, which is the language of God, and then you've got human language, again paralleling the tree of life and the tree of knowledge, our language, so we can understand the world. We're the most important thing. That's what we're really saying when we eat from the tree of knowledge, of good and evil. We're the ones who are choosing, right? It's not God. God's not everything. So that's the problem. Choosing life would be the language of creation, realizing that everything comes from God. It's all God's word. Because the idea of Jews and non-Jews. So this is all talk about Jews and non-Jews both exist within that branch, or those two branches. You've got the tree of life, tree of knowledge. Within the tree of knowledge, now you've got human beings. You've got languages. You've got a language of a spiritual language and more physical language. You've also got a more spiritual people, the ones who are meant to bring God into the world. And you've got the physical nations, 70 nations, which are meant to be a place, a form of human beings, soul and body combined, just like the Jews are, but with a different purpose. They're meant to fix the lower aspect of creation, which is to make a place for God's presence to come into. Okay? That's the duality of the Jew and the non-Jew. And of course, again, like with all these dualities, there's meant to be a connection between the two, and they're meant to be unified and become one. Just like the soul and the body can go to heaven together, the ideal is that the Jews and the non-Jews come together to go to heaven. That's the idea of the perfection of the world peace when Mashiach comes, please, very soon, please God. The idea of world peace, the idea of unity of all nations. Okay, then within the Jews and the non-Jews, nations, everything, we can take the fractal even more. So the Jew branch, the non-Jew branch, it doesn't matter. You create another set of branches, another set of binary interactions, a duality again, called male and female. You've got men and women. Yeah, the idea of the men, they're meant to be the spiritual ones. This is the Jewish idea. The men are actually more conceptual, they're more interested in ideas. Women are more interested in making this world a place which is not just inhabitable, which can thrive. The women are the ones who generally are better with people. The men are not very good with other people. They're good with ideas. Whereas women are the ones who are good with people, about building society, building a family. The women are usually the ones who are much more suited to looking after the family. But again, man and woman are meant to be together. We understand that Adam, when he was created, he was actually created as one, what's the word? One synthesized being. I'm not sure what the word would be. He was a man and a woman together. They were sort of like back to back. Right? The man on one side, the woman on the other side. Then when God created Eve, he split them apart and built Eve up, and then they face each other, and then they can have a relationship. But it all starts from this idea of total unity. You could think of what that reflects. Okay, so again, so you've got the idea of male and female, husband and wife. But then you've got another expression of that. You've got parents and children. The idea of the parents are the ones who are teaching the children, helping the children grow up. And hopefully the desire of all parents is that the children are greater than them, right? In a way. Yeah, we always want our children to actually be to have more pleasure in the world and more fulfillment in the world than we do ourselves. People are willing to give up their lives for their children. So that's the idea of wanting the children to grow up to become humans. And then you've got a new sort of connection between the parents and the children, sort of a unity there, which works together. Yeah. For those who know Eastern religions, things like that, this is very similar to the idea of Taoism. Right? The Taoism is you've got the yin and the yang, you've got the two opposite forces, but the seed of one is in the other. It doesn't quite work like that in Judaism. You've got we understand there's a hierarchy. It's not how do I do this for the screen? It's not like that where both of them are sort of interacting. It's more like that, right? You've got one giver and one taker, but the taker becomes a giver because it's giving the opportunity of the giver to give. It therefore, by proxy, gives to the giver by letting God give to the giver, as we explained in the first lecture. So we see this pattern repeating itself the whole time. This idea of two things, two opposites, which are meant to work together to make a beautiful harmony. It's interesting. The word for harmony in Hebrew is tiferes, which means beauty. Yeah. You've got two opposites. When they come together, that's where you get beauty. You don't get beauty just by a monochrome picture. Yeah, it's one which has got contrast and opposition, but yet the opposition goes together. Same thing in music. Anyone's musical out there? Yeah. The idea of the different chords. You can have major and minor. You can have a major song which sounds very nice and happy. You can have a minor one which sounds very brooding and sort of negative or scary. Yeah, right. But you can actually, a really beautiful song is one which manages to combine the major and the minor together, so you get a feeling of minor, but yet there's hope at the end, and the major, minor comes up to the major. Again, you see that duality even in music, right? Okay, so let's have a look at this world. Where do we see this in this world? If you look at the nature of light, when we say the word duality, the first thing people would think of, from a scientific background, would be the idea of wave-particle duality, right? The idea of light being energy waves, light waves from the electromagnetic spectrum. And on the other hand, you've got photons, which are packages, the pieces of material, matter, where light has a weight to it, even though it's a very small weight, right? It's still physical in a way. Just tiny, very, very hard to see, right? But on the other hand, it's energy. But the truth is, it's both together. The idea of wave-particle duality is, the Jewish way of looking at it would be that you've got a reality which is called light, and it manifests itself in this world in two different ways. You've got the more spiritual way, which would be energy, and you've got the more physical way, which is matter. But the truth is, you need both together to have a fully functioning light. As we know, the different experiments, they show that light is either energy or matter, so therefore you can't say it's only energy, because then you're losing all the aspects of light. Light wouldn't bend then, I think. That's one of the ideas. Maybe to the solar eclipse, where it bends around the moon because it's got mass. That was Einstein's proof. That was a proof for Einstein's way of looking at it. That was matter, if I remember correctly. Let's not get sidetracked, as I tend to do. Right. So you've got two aspects of light, right? In the Kabbalah, in the mystical teachings of the Torah, you've got the idea of God's light. God's light starts off, you've got as just God's light, but then it splits into two types of light. You've got what's called a fine light and a coarse light, or a crude light. They're both light, but as God is starting to create the creation, and he started to make his light more tangible, he creates these two aspects of light. We've got this more spiritual light, more physical light, and then we'll see when the first and the fourth day of creation, we see that being manifest much more strongly. We've got the idea of the spiritual light of the first day and the physical light of the sun, moon, and stars on the fourth day. Again, you've got that duality there again. Whereas really one is just the clothing of the other. One is just the physical expression, the revelation of the higher one. Yeah, but the fact is they have to move together. Okay, you have the idea of potential and actualization. Yeah, the idea that something has got, something has the energy which it wants to be revealed. Yeah, it's like they say, the worst thing to get on the child's report card, it says your son has so much potential. He's got more potential than anyone else in the class. You know what that means? That means he hasn't actualized his potential yet, right? That means he's a nice way of saying he's good for nothing at the moment, right? The idea is to actualize, to bring something out, very similar to the male and the female idea. The man's the one with all the ideas, the concepts. The woman's the one who helps him bring his ideas out into the physical world by giving him the physical structure in order to thrive. Right? That's the idea of potential and actualization. Also, we spoke about the idea the idea of the intellect and imagination. There's two aspects to our mind. So now we're going into the human being itself, into this combination of soul and body, which is a human being. Let's look at just the mind. Let's look at this branch called the head. Within the head, you've got two aspects of thinking. You've got intellect, which is the idea of understanding abstract concepts, and you've got the idea of imagination, the idea of picturing physically superficial things. Imagination always works with pictures, always. If you're thinking about something and there's no image in your mind, that means you're thinking about a concept. There isn't anything else. You're either thinking about concepts or you're thinking about pictures. Pictures relate to the external, physical, revealed part of the world, whereas concepts refer to the abstract, the things which are beyond what's visible. And of course, in order to function like a normal human being, doesn't matter whether you're an artist who uses not a lot of imagination, or you're a pure mathematician who uses complete abstraction, you always need a bit of both. Because a mathematician or a scientist, look at how Einstein thought of his ideas, yeah? He was abstractifying the idea of the concept of light, but you always use a picture, right? Imagine a person sitting on the light and he's traveling at the speed of light, and then there's another thing which is the speed of light coming towards him or whatever. You're thinking in pictures, because those pictures are the external skin or the external interface between you and the idea, which is just out of your mind's reach. So in order to get to the idea, you need to have an interface, and that is imagination. Whereas an artist, he's focusing more on the nice picture, but if you only have just pictures and ideas, but there's no order to them, you end up with a whole big mess. There has to be some sort of structure to the picture, otherwise it's just modern art. Well, won't go into that, but I think you can probably guess my opinion on that, right? So you need to have a balance of the two. You have the idea, which is connected with this, of the idea of, in the word Hebrew, remember we spoke about the word davar and davar in Hebrew, where the word and the thing are the same. There's also a similar idea with a different word called face. What's the word for face in Hebrew? It's ponim. Pei nun yud mem. Ponim, right? What's the word for internal? Is panim. Panima. Kol kavod bas melech panima. It's in Psalms 44, I think. 45, 42, 44, 45. Kol kavod bas melech panima. The honor of the daughter of a melech, the daughter of a king, is panima, is on the inside. Right? So the idea of internal and external, right? In Hebrew, it's the same word. It's panim and the ponim. Why? Because the ponim, the face, reflects the panim. The way you can see my thoughts, right, is by looking at the expressions in my face, also listening to my voice, but also taking the external ponim face, and you intuit what's on the panim, and you try connecting to my mind. That's what you're doing when you're listening to me speak now. You're taking the external and you're trying to intuit and to penetrate into the internal. Again, another duality, but of course you need both. This is the whole idea. You've got these two opposites and you always need a bridge. You need to bridge them together. The bridge itself is the unity of the two which come together. That's why we just see that the whole structure of the universe is based on this idea of two opposites, and they of the same category, but the two polar ends of it, and they come together to become one, to create a beautiful harmony and to create something new. Right, so that's intellect and imagination. Look at my notes. I had to write notes for this one because there's just so many things to remember. Concept and manifestation, right? So we've got this is the idea which some philosophers might be familiar with, and I think we mentioned it as well. The idea in Hebrew is called chomer and surah. Surah means abstract concept. Chomer means the physical manifestation of it. Like we spoke about the concept of a table. That's the example we gave when we had the lecture on Lashon HaKodesh and Hebrew. You've got the idea of a table, which is the Hebrew word Shin Lamed Ches Nun, Shulchan, and the manifestation of that. The Chomer is a physical place or the physical vessel where you see the concept manifest in. So it's like plasticine, let's think. Yeah, let's use that as an example. Yeah, if I have the idea of a statue, right? So I take the raw materials and I imprint my idea, right, onto the statue, right? But so temporarily the physical is taking the form of my thoughts, of the concept. The concept is permanent. That can't be destroyed. Objectively, obviously I could forget the concept, but the concept is there. The concept of a table, let's say, right? The physical manifestation can take that concept and be a manifestation of it, but it can also break later, and then it will become something else. It'll become a broken table, or it'll become something else. If you go back right to the very first verse in the whole Torah, Bereshis bara Elokim, in the beginning God created Eis HaShamayim v'Eis Haaretz, the heavens and the earth. There you go. Right? You've got the idea of the heavens, which is the spiritual realm, and the Oretz is the earth. And if you look at the word carefully, it says Eis HaShamayim. Eis is sort of, it's a very hard word to translate. It goes on a definite article. I think that's the idea. Right, so Eis HaShamayim, the heaven. HaShamayim means the heaven. Eis HaShamayim means the whole of the heaven. I mean that whole idea. The Eis Haaretz, and the earth. Now the rabbis actually learn from here that God created the heavens, and the Eis HaShamayim means the things which are offshoots or products of the heaven. So you got the heaven, the spiritual realm, and I guess that would be the angels, the sky, birds, whatever in that realm. I'm not exactly sure what they would be. Could be referring to God's attributes, maybe. Right? The Eis Haaretz, you can understand it on many different levels. So it's okay, but just focus on the idea here. The Eis Haaretz, you've got the earth, and the Eis Haaretz in one of the rules in midrashic derivation and exegesis, where we take a verse and we analyze the words, we break them down into their elements. One of the rules is that the word Eis is meant to include something which is tofa, which is secondary to the primary thing in the sentence. So you've got, for example, it says for the first 3 years you're not meant to eat the fruits of the tree. Baraltem orlasoi es perioi, right? So es perioi means it's fruit. You're meant to distance its fruit. And es perioi tells us something which is secondary to the fruit, which is the skin. So therefore, Jews are not allowed to have benefit even from the skins of the fruits for the first 3 years of that tree's life. So here again, Eis HaShamayim v'Eis Haaretz, you've got the heavens, which is the spiritual realm, and things which come from the spiritual. And Eis Haaretz, you've got the land, the earth, and anything which comes from the earth. And in fact, the spiritual roots of these four ideas are the four letters of God's name. The Yud and the Hey represents the Yud, that's the point, the letter which is just a point essentially, the letter Yud. We spoke about this before in the language lecture. And then what comes out from there is the Hey. Hey always represents the idea of revelation. Like, hey. Oh, okay, in English it would be, hey, look, it's me. Right? But the word hey literally means here it is. In the end of Genesis is Hey Lochem Zerah. I think it's chapter 47, somewhere around there. Yeah. When Joseph is giving the seeds to the Egyptians from the storehouses in the years of the famine, he says, Hey Lochem Zerah, here is to you the seeds, and go and plant the land, the earth. So the letter Hey represents the idea of revelation. So again, you've got the heavens, that's represented by the Yud. Then you got the Hey, which is like, no, it's not very good. This is back to front. All right, so that's what Hey looks like. It's actually a Daled with a Yud in it. It's got a little leg here. Okay, I've really got to get some sort of a notepad or something, or word, so you can actually see these Hebrew letters, since I'm using them so much. Okay, so that's the Yud and the Hey. And then you've got the Vov, which is, remember the Yud is the dot, that is heaven. Then you've got the Vov, is the source of the energy source of the earth, which is essentially a vertical line. So it starts off with the dot, but then you extend the dot down. That's what the earth. Again, you see the idea of the earth being part of the heaven, because it all comes from that dot, which is the Yud. So again, this idea of duality, again, we see in the Yud and the Vav. So you've got the Yud and its product, which is the Hey. Then you've got the earth, that's the Vav, and the product of the earth is the Hey, which comes after the Vav. So that's why you got the name Yud and a Hey, and a Vav and a Hey is God's name. And you see this idea of the fractal straight in the name itself. And remember, God's name is a source of everything. So we see this idea in God's name. You see the heaven and the earth, the Yud and the Vav, and you see the idea of the expansion of the Yud into the Hey and the Vav into the Hey, which means that heaven and earth have got their own duality. Within the heaven you've got a duality, and within the earth you've got duality. You've got the main aspects of the earth and the secondary aspects of the earth. Okay, thinking maybe we can even make a second one. Well, actually, we're coming to the end of the examples here. So we've got the idea of the heaven and the earth, and we look at the actual 6 days of creation, and the seventh is the Sabbath. We actually see this again. Every day we see this duality happening. What was created on the first day? The light and the dark. And there was morning and there was evening. Right? Morning is the time, daytime is the time of the day where things get done. Evening is the thing which lets us consolidate, go to sleep, re-energize. Without the night, we couldn't crystallize the thing which we do in the day. We'd just be working constantly, we'd be worn out. Light and dark. As you said, light is the main thing which we're meant to bring into the world. But, as we explained, we can't perceive God directly. That we can only explain, this is the third lecture about Gilu Yichud, about God's oneness, why he does everything, is in order to reveal there's nothing except God, there's no other power besides God. And we explained the only way we can understand God is by contrast. God himself, there doesn't have to be a good as a background, a bad on the background for God to actually be good. God is good intrinsically. But for us to appreciate God being good, we need to have the idea of evil and seeing the contrast between good and evil and appreciating the light from the dark. And ultimately we see that even evil itself is ultimately good, because it's all there to give us free will. This idea of the darkness becoming light. That's the first day of creation. The second day of creation, same idea. You've got the waters split. You've got the higher waters, which are close to God, the low waters, which are far from God. And the idea of the waves, the low waters was very turbulent. They said, we want to go back. Why is it fair? Why do they get to be close to you, God, but us down here are far away? Yeah, why do the heavens get to be close to God and the sea is so far away? So God said, because you wanted that, I'm going to give you a reward. Obviously, measure for measure, because they want to get close to God. Whatever this means, we have to understand what this is. Let's just focus on the lesson rather than start picturing like, oh, the sea is thinking, talking. What's that? Leave that aside. Let's focus on the concepts which we can draw out of this narrative. So the sea wants to get close to God. So say, okay, fine. So therefore, on the altar in the tabernacle or the Beis Hamikdash in the temple, we're always going to have something from you. Therefore, the sea has salt water. So therefore, salt comes from the sea. On all the sacrifices, you have to bring salt. Right, and you've got the idea of the water, the libations, pouring the water on the altar as well. Right, the third day, we've got on one hand you've got the trees, which are the very big, tall things which grow from the ground. Well, first of all, you've got the land and the sea. That's got its own duality. The idea of the sea, according to one midrash, represents the world to come. The earth represents the physical world, which is this world, right? Whatever. Also, you've got the idea of the trees and the shrubs. Clearly, there's a duality there. You've got the taller things, the things which are stand out, and you've got the things which are sort of more connected with the ground itself, right? And we have the rabbis speak about that. If you look very carefully at the words in the verses on the third day, you'll see that something changed. God said the trees should bring out fruits, and the fruits were meant to be like the tree. That means the tree should have been edible just like the fruits. But instead, what the trees did, they actually made the fruits the nice, desirable thing, where the tree itself is not desirable, which is the idea that the product is more precious than the source, which is going to be the source of the sin of Adam, who thought that I'm the product, I'm more important than the source, than God. That's what they speak about then. Then you've got the fourth day, you've got the sun, moon, and the stars, but focusing on the sun and the moon, you've got two luminaries, both very, very bright, but the moon is the one which is receiving the light of the sun. Okay, so you've got that duality there. The problem was the moon said, I want to be more important than the sun. So God said, fine, so you get to, we can only have one ruler of the sky. All right, it'll have to be the sun, not you. As soon as the moon wanted to be something itself, but the moon's just a mirror of the sun. So if you've got a mirror and you color it in with nice colors, it can't reflect anymore. That's the idea of the moon becoming smaller. The idea of the solar and the lunar calendar, very interesting. Yeah. Solar and the lunar calendar is the idea of the solar calendar is based on the sun. It's the idea of constantness in the world. Yeah, it's always 365 days, right? The sun never changes. The lunar calendar is based on the 29.5-day cycle, which the moon takes to wax and wane. It starts off as black, then it gets a tiny slither of light, then it builds up until you get a full moon in the middle of the month, and then it starts waning then it goes into a crescent and disappears. That's a lunar month. The Jewish people are commanded to unify the two. So in the Western world, if you remember, we spoke about the two poles of the world, the East and the West. The Western world, which is one more connected, again, by the way, you've got this duality again. I just realized Yishmael and Esau, the East and the West. Yishmael, the East, are the more spiritual ones. They're the ones which reach up. Then you've got the physical nations. The other half of the nations are more physical. The idea of a functioning, building society and physical world, but not necessarily having that natural connection with the spiritual. The idea is they're both meant to come together, and the Jewish people are actually meant to represent that bring together. The Jews are the ones who bring both sides of the world together to fulfill their purpose. So you've got the spiritual and the physical coming together. Right, so it's interesting that the Muslims actually count by the lunar calendar, which is the one which grows, wanes and waxes and wanes. The Western world goes by the solar calendar, right? So they've got 365 days a year. That's always the same, never changes. Whereas the lunar calendar, the different, I think Ramadan is the month of fasting of the Muslims. It can happen, I think I worked out every 34 years or something like that. It goes through a whole cycle. It could be any time of the year. It could be summer, spring, autumn, winter. Yeah, it just changes because it's all based on this sort of change, always want to be growth, want to burst out of this world and connect. Whereas the Western world wants to be steady and sort of like stable. Right? Jewish people say you need a stable world, but we need to connect. We need to always be growing. That's the idea there. That's the idea of the solar and the lunar. Okay, I'm not going into the. You might have noticed the problem there that the lunar seems to be the spiritual one. The solar is the physical one, which is kind of the other way around from the way we describe the sun and the moon. Yeah, that's another question which I'm not going to get into. That's a complex question to do with things do flip round. So, all right. Right, then you've got the fifth day, you've got the birds and the fish, right? So you've got the higher ones and the lower ones again. And the sixth day you've got man and the animals, right? And even within man you've got man and woman, you've got the tree, the test of the tree of life, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. If you look at it very carefully, the first 3 days of creation are the spiritual ones, and the second set of 3 days are the physical ones. Again, you've got duality within the 7 days itself. You've got the idea of light, water, earth on the first 3 days. Then you've got a physical manifestation, the expression, the revelation of light on the fourth day, sun, moon and stars. The revelation of the purpose of the high and the low waters. That means you've got the life coming from in the form of birds and fish. And on the sixth day, you've got the revelation of the potential. Again, remember we spoke about potential and actualization. You've got the potential of the earth is on the third day. The sixth day is you've got the actualization of the physical world, whereas you've got life thriving on the earth. It's beautiful. Again, I hope you can see these patterns. They're sort of all overlapping and branching from each other. And then you've got Shabbos, which is the ultimate duality, with the whole 6 days of the week. The seventh day of the week, God rested, which is, the Torah says, Vayom HaShavi'i, this is a chapter base, verse 3, Vayom HaShavi'i, on the seventh day, Shabbos, God rested, Vayinofush, and he let out, he exhaled, let's say, whatever that means. Literally, that's what it means literally, right? Nefisha means breath. Oh, sorry, nefesh means to rest, but when a person rests, he goes, that's what, so to speak, God did on the seventh day. Try to get it with your intellect, not with your imagination here. Okay, good. Right. Okay. However vivid and visual these ideas are, we can't get trapped into thinking of these things as pictures. Always try to focus on the concept. Use the pictures, maybe a way of making it easier to understand the concepts, but always remember we're talking about concepts. So what's the idea of Vayinofush? Also uses the word nefesh. Vayinofush, nefesh. Nefesh is the name of the soul. Right? There's many names of the soul. One of them is nefesh. So what's going on the Shabbos, on the Sabbath? God's giving. He created light, he created water, he created physical, fruits, everything. Animals, man. What's missing? Spirituality. That's what's missing. Shabbos is the day of spirituality. That's the idea of the soul of the world. So again, you've got this duality, just like you've got the soul and the body. Yeah, we spoke about why does evil exist in the world. Yeah, because it's an expression of this place where it's meant to be a dark place, and we're meant to bring the light into the place of darkness. So the physical world is a place where you can do so much, you can bring spirituality and elevate the whole universe, Or you can, God forbid, do the opposite. The person can be drawn after the physicality and cut the spiritual out, which is very damaging, obviously. That's the idea of the 6 days of the world. You've got the physical sort of arena where we can start working. Who's going to win? Is it going to be spiritual or physical now? Shabbos is when we bring that spiritual in. God created the soul of the world on Shabbos. The spiritual aspect, element of reality was created on Shabbos, on the 7th day. So again, you've got that duality again there. Okay. Okay, it's gone on quite long, this lecture. It's the longest one so far, but I think we can finish it off just with a few ideas now. Just tying it all together. Well, not tying it together, but finish off with a few ideas just to give you the breadth of how much this literally covers everything. In Judaism, we've got the concept, there's 3 dimensions, 3 essential dimensions. They're called Olam, Shana, and Nefesh. Olam means the physical dimension. Shana means the temporal dimension, which means time. And Nefesh means, we just said that. Nefesh means the soul, means spirituality. Right, yeah. So look at the duality which we've spoken about today, and you'll see that you have it in all these 3 dimensions. When it comes to Nefesh, souls, life, you've got God and you've got the world, spiritual world, the physical world, the soul and the body. You've got this sort of, from spiritual to physical sort of axis. You've got the duality in souls, right? And we spend the different languages, the Jews and non-Jews, man and woman, parents, children. All different ways of bringing out this. Each one's got their own unique way of interacting. But that's the idea of spiritual and physical. We've got the eastern half of the 70 nations, the western half, spiritual ones, the physical ones. Right, that's Nefesh. Shona, in time you've also got, like we just explained, in time you've got this duality, the 6 days of the week, and you've got Shabbos. You've got the holy days. I'm not going to go into them because that's very technical, but you've got, within the holy days themselves, you've got Shabbos, and you've got the other festivals, right? You've got, every month we can have something called Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh is meant to be the spiritual, the Rosh, the head, the spiritual part of the Chodesh, of the month. And then you've got the rest of the month is meant to be the physical, split into 4 weeks, which is 2 by 2. Again, anything I could, not me personally, but people could theoretically speak about for hours and hours on any of these topics. Literally, probably days and weeks, to be honest, but we're just trying to do our best here. Right, so that's in time. Where do we see it in space, in the physical, geographical dimension? Where do we see this? So we have the idea of the spiritual and the physical places, right? So we've got the idea of Eretz Yisrael, the Eretz Canaan. In the Torah it's called Eretz Canaan. We call it Eretz Yisrael now, the land of the Jews, which is Israel, more or less. It's not quite, talking about the state of Israel, we're talking about the actual place in Numbers, in Bamidbar, chapter, I think it's around 34, something like that. Is that right? 34, that's 35. 34, either 33 or 34. Where it speaks about the borders of Eretz Yisrael when the Jews came in originally. That land there, within those borders, has got a certain holiness, and that holiness spreads out to the rest of the world, giving energy and life force and success and the ability to thrive for the whole world, just like the soul and the body. That's the idea of Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel. So that's the duality there. You've got Israel, the rest of the world. Now, within Israel, you've got this duality again. You've got Jerusalem, Yerushalayim, which is the place where the temple is. Yerushalayim itself is a holy city, not just the temple itself. There's certain laws. You can only do certain commandments if you're actually in Jerusalem eating the tithes. If you have a look at chapter 12 or 13 in Deuteronomy, in Devarim, speaks about you have to go up to Jerusalem to eat the different tithes, the Masa Sheni. Right, so again, in relation to Eretz Yisrael, to Israel itself, you've got Jerusalem as the spiritual aspect, and then you've got the physical aspect relative to it, right, which is the rest of the land of Israel. You've got another axis there, another duality, right? Then within Jerusalem itself, you've got the Temple Mount, and you've got the rest of Jerusalem. And then within the Temple Mount, so we're using magnifying glass, we're getting closer, closer, closer now, right? So we've got the Temple Mount, and the holiest part of the Temple Mount is actually the temple when it was there. Then in the temple, right, you've got the holy area, and you've got the Holy of Holies, where the Ark of the Covenant, the Aron was, the Holy Covenant. Then even within the Aron itself, you've got the Aron, you've got the lid with the cherubs on it, the cherubim. You would say you've got the cherubim and the space between the cherubim. Again. So you see, again, you've got this idea of always interactions, always pairs of things interacting with each other. I'm not going into all those details exactly what the significance of the pairings are. Some of them I actually don't know, but we're always learning. But again, I'm just trying to give an overview here. You can see this covers so many things. Right, and finally, yes, we left out another aspect. We spoke about the soul and the body. Now you've got the soul and the body, you've got man, you've got mankind. You've got two separate aspects of mankind. You've got the Jews and the non-Jews. Right, you've got male and female parents, children. Right, but then, even within the Jews themselves, you have the holy Jews, which are, well, the priests. And you've got the ones, the Israelim, like me. I'm not a priest. I come from one of the other tribes. So we've got the whole within nefesh, within living beings. You have, again, within the holy aspect, you've got some which are more holy than the others. And there's meant to be, just like the Jews and non-Jews are meant to create something beautiful. They're meant to create for the whole world. They're meant to bring God in and elevate the world. So each one's meant to do their part to make that connection happen. The priests and the Israelim, the regular Jews, are meant to have a similar interaction as well. Right? The priests are meant to be the ones which connect us with Hashem. By bringing the sacrifices, by doing the work in the temple, where the temple is meant to be the bridge between the higher worlds and the physical world, is where the blessing of the whole world comes from the temple. That's why it's a big mistake for the Romans to destroy the temple, because they're just destroying all the blessing which they would have got. It's just been severely stifled because of the destruction of the temple. The whole world now is lacking that aspect of a strong life force. It's like an ill person whose soul is in there, but it can't really interact with the body properly because it's ill. So the universe is ill until the Mashiach comes, where that connection with Hashem will be coming in full force, and the whole world, please God, will come back to life again, so its own resurrection, right, of the whole world. Then within the Kohanim, of course, you've got the regular Kohanim, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest. The high priest is the one who goes in to where once a year on the holiest day, Yom Kippur, Again, the duality between Yom Kippur and all the other festivals, all the other days of the year. That's the Holy One. Then the holiest person goes in, on the holiest day, to the holiest place, which is the Holy of Holies, which compared to the rest of the temple is the holy place, and the other one is the more of the external aspect of it. Okay, right, so we've gone through a massive amount in here. Of course, we've got the Medrash we spoke about. Got the holy and the mundane. We spoke about God saw on the sixth day everything he did, and it was very good. What does it mean, very good? So we explained that very good means like the Yetzer Tov, the good inclination, the urge to do good. Very good is the idea of the evil inclination, and we explained why, because it brings a higher level of revelation that God is in charge of everything, because if there's nothing to oppose God, then there cannot be revealed this higher aspect that even evil is doing God's job, right? And the idea of Gan Eden and Gehenna, the Garden of Eden and Gehenna and hell, again, got those two things. Then, as we explained in one of the lectures, the idea that the hell is meant to eventually be transformed into heaven through the suffering in hell. We reveal a new aspect of God which wasn't there before, right? And that itself, by bringing God into the world through the suffering, actually creates the experience of God, which is ultimate pleasure. It's got the life and death, good and evil, the tree of life, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, etc. So we see this idea of fractals, the idea that God creates the world in this binary fashion, and then he just expands, branches. It's always reflecting that original paradigm of God himself and his revelation to us. Everything else parallels that in some way, in very, very complex ways, as we can see. Right? And now we can start to appreciate what the final rectification is going to be. Because if everything boils down to basically a binary, so therefore all God has to do to rectify everything in creation, to show there's nothing besides God, is first of all you have to see how everything branches out from this one formula of the binary idea. And then once God shows that, oh no, even the lower aspect is really part of the higher aspect, you've got unity there, so therefore it collapses, and like dominoes, everything collapses. There's a revelation that all the opposites are really just one thing. They're just revelations of the higher element of the binary, of the duality, and eventually all that comes together and it reveals the ultimate unity of the spiritual and the physical, and ultimately our experience of God and God himself, which means that our experience of God will be the experience of God himself, which means our experience will be so high that we're almost experiencing God himself, because we will have become like God, as we explained in the first and third lecture. We become infinite givers like God, right? So that again, everything collapses, everything comes together, and the whole universe, with all its aspects, concepts, physical, people, animals, everything in creation comes to one point where everything's at one with God, and you've got that ultimate infinite pleasure. Time itself, again, you've got time and timelessness, infinite time and temporal time becomes all infinite. So that's what we're looking forward to, and now we understand, maybe we get a glimpse of how God's is going to achieve this. And it's actually amazingly how complex the world is, but the secret to the world is so simple. And it has to be at the end of the day, because it's God, and God is the ultimate perfection, the ultimate simplicity is just he is. No complexity, not made up of parts. So therefore the whole world is going to be unified in that way. And that's everything we've spoken about until now. You can look at it from a new angle. Now, the idea of good and evil becoming one, we understand, because we're trying to unify everything. Unifying. You have to have the opposites to start off with. All right, okay, I think that's enough. It's a very long lecture. Hopefully people actually listen to the whole thing, because it's very rich, a lot of ideas here, tons of ideas. And thanks for watching, everyone. It's very kind if you've actually got through the whole thing. And we hope to have you watching our next video. Thanks for watching, and all the best. Bye for now.